Are there any questions before we take a break? I mean, there's no need to get all worked up about this. I've heard it before. It's not that good. We just got to get, through one thing at a time. And this is my very first time to Newfoundland, and so I've never been this far northeast on this continent. I was telling the crew at dinner, and it's kind of jazzing, but I still can't get used to the half hour that just keeps throwing me off, that half hour. And I'm really delighted to be among Pentecostals, although I'm always nervous as a Baptist to be among Pentecostals because I kind of feel like I'm missing something. And, like maybe I was telling the crew again at dinner tonight, us Baptists, we're famous for trying to be the Spirit. We tell God what to do all the time. And so we just kind of enter into the councils. In fact, my tribe meets every June to tell God what to do for the next year. And I know he holds his breath each year wanting to know just what will he be up to in the coming year. And then we inform him. And he's very grateful for our help on that. I love your singing. I was thinking you should keep going, and if the band would come on back up and play and sing underneath my presentation, that would be really good. I'm kidding. The band is out on their smoke break. I don't know what y'all think. I mean, I sat through their stuff, but no, I know they're around somewhere. They kind of filtered out into the crowd. You don't want to put that crew together. And I did take time off from my meetings with the Prime Minister to come with you. I'm just paving the way for President Trump. And would that be a hoot or what? Trump and Trudeau in the same room? I mean, talk about yin and yang. And that would almost be worth it for a day, or just maybe part of a day. But I trust it doesn't happen on our end. But here I'm in this bastion of liberalism, and we're here in the Atlantic provinces, and I get to go back home and tell them not to worry. Things are going to be good in Canada. I was actually in your country the night Stephen Harper was elected, so I seem to hit on these momentous events. So I'll see you in 4 years, if not sooner. That's the one thing you have over us, it seems. All right. Well, I do want to do something, something related to my assignment before we quit tonight. And as soon as I remember it, I'm going to share it with you. I looked over your stuff back when Jeffrey and issued the invitation on behalf of your province and your conference, and we started chatting about what we could talk about here, or what I could talk about. And I looked at your new discipling stuff, which I think you're going to hear a little bit about, and then this formation business and spiritual health and all that kind of stuff. And what made sense to me is that I would just start tonight talking about you. Because I think a lot of times we run right past us, right out into this world to do whatever it is we think we've been called to do. And I want you to know that God is more interested in turning you into a person than he is into turning you into a pastor. Turning you into a pastor is pretty easy. Turning you into a person, now that's tough work. In fact, I know people who've gone into ministry to keep from becoming people. You can just kind of hide out in plain view. Just do the role, don't spill the juice too much, and get it done that way. And I think that I want to spend the evening. I don't know why I'm dancing with this table, except I feel like it's between me and you, and I want to get it out of the way. That was in my contract not to have a table, but that's all right. You didn't. You ignored the other 35 pages as well. Green room requirements. There's not a green room on this campus. All right, so And so just in case the mission of God includes you, just on an outside shot, I want to talk to you about you. Now, not in maybe the usual kind of preachy way, because most of what I'm going to share with tonight and tomorrow, and if you come back tomorrow, it's not going to be very sermonish, because I don't feel qualified to address people that listen to the Spirit in spiritual truth. So I'm just going to talk to you about my work with leaders and what I observe in people that I do a lot of coaching and some of my own stuff. And I'll just let the Spirit, after we sang in a gentle way, he doesn't always show up in a gentle way, but we invited him here in a gentle way, just to do the work. And I really think it's good that you're here as couples, many of you. Because when I talk to you tonight about self-awareness, the one truth about self-awareness is that we cannot come to that knowledge by ourselves. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? We don't become self-aware without other people telling us about us. We don't go off and search ourselves and come to these. So I really kind of hope I stimulate some conversation between you and your spouse. Good conversation, not "I told you so," or "Yeah, boy, was he talking to you," or "It's about time." I'm not trying to hand you clubs to beat each other with. That's what my tribe would do in a meeting like this, and just tell you how miserable you really are, in case you haven't acknowledged that lately. But I think that I just want to maybe crack open a few doors and just invite you to explore some areas. I'll tell you how important this is, because you becoming you is, I think, probably the most major expression of God's mission on the planet. Now, it's not all the mission, and there are cosmic dimensions to the mission, but when it really gets down to it, and I'll come back and I'll circle back to in that tonight, you becoming you is dead center of God's mission on planet Earth. And so I invite you to think about not becoming more self-centered, not becoming more self-absorbed, but becoming more self-aware. And let me just show you how important it is. For instance, a key piece of self-awareness is the story we tell ourselves. The narrative that's running inside our own heads. Often when I do coaching, I'll ask someone, I've got a guy coming to see me just at the end of next week. Spend a couple days. He's at a critical point in his life. And one of the questions that I asked him early was, when I started coaching him a couple of years ago, what book, what TV show, what play, what novel, something that would be known to a bunch of, would you say typifies your life? By the way, I don't know if you guys can hear that back there. Should I just stay away from this? Is this the non-spirit zone? I walk into my carnal self on this. All right, fix it. You've got one job to do. You're back there playing video poker. That was on page 12, by the way. Get me a competent sound crew that knows what's going on up here. I'm sorry. You guys are doing really a great job. Are you getting it zoned in now? Don't let that happen again. I deserve that, but I don't. Okay, that's messing with my pacemaker. All right. You don't think I have a heart. All right. I truly don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to stay put, and then I'll let you figure it out. What was I talking about? Can anybody remember? Does it really matter? So I asked people to give me, a book or TV. I remember the first staff that I did this with, big old honking church, about 4,500 people on a Sunday, and they asked me to come out to do this consult. And 6 out of the 7 people on the executive team, when I asked them that question, what book, they said Titanic. Now, you do not have to be particularly prescient as a consultant to know what kind of situation you're going into when the whole executive team thinks we're just rearranging deck chairs. We're just trying to get off this sucker. We're going down. It was kind of a terrifying thing. But sometimes when I do local church consults, I'll ask the same question to, groups that the staff put together for me. And about a third of the time, maybe, or maybe up to a half of the time, I'll get these epic responses like, Lord of the Rings. Tell me about your church, Lord of the Rings, or Master and Commander at the Far Side of you, or something like that. Some epic venture. And then, about a third of the time, I'll get stuff like, well, he's just not that into you, and that tells me these folks are dealing at a much smaller, agenda than what God would have. So I've been telling you long enough now, so you've started thinking. And if we had time and this was a real workshop, and you were really serious about making any difference, and if I really cared whether you got this or not, I would have you turn to each other and say, but you might do this later. What book, what TV show, what movie kind of typifies your life? Let me tell you the importance of that self-narrative. You see, I contend that Saul, the first king of Israel, never saw himself as king. And he lived into that narrative. Because guess what? You're going to live into the narrative that's playing in your head. Because that's what's describing and defining reality for you. That's the filter that you're engaging the world around you with. It's how you're coming to yourself with this story. Because you remember in Saul's life, here's a guy who had everything going for him, right? He was handsome. He was tall. He had a lot of physical prowess. He had good family name. But they have to coach him. He's hiding in the baggage, whatever that is, King James language. And he's and they have to coach him out. And when Samuel comes to deliver, or Gandalf comes to deliver, the word, don't you think Gandalf is a great image for Samuel? Where's he come from, and why is he coming now, and what's he been up to since he was here last time? This mysterious figure shows up, and he declares to Saul that his kingdom's going to be taken away. And when Samuel starts quoting God, the very first words out of his mouth are, Saul, though you were small in your own eyes, I made you king. What a telling caveat. Saul was small in his own eyes. He lived into that smallness. Now David, on the other hand, second king of Israel. Nobody saw him as king, apparently. How would you like to grow up knowing that your own dad couldn't come up with your name when, Samuel shows up to anoint a king? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, he just keeps going. I'm just not getting the email, Jesse, you got to know, we got the kid out back practicing to be a rock star, but I don't know if we really, bring him in. How would you like to grow up with that story, knowing that? And you've got, but yet David's favorite name for himself in the Psalms is the Lord's anointed. It's his favorite phrase that he used of himself. If you're the Lord's anointed in your narrative, doesn't matter that other people don't see you there. You're the Lord's. This is why David, when he would fall would fall up instead of falling down. This is why David, becomes a person after God's heart. And that magnificent, statue of David and Michelangelo in Florence, 17 feet off the ground, 14 feet plus a 3-foot pedestal. The pupils in that statue, the pupils of David are in the shape of a heart. The heart of God imprinted on him because he saw himself as the Lord's anointed. Now, all that I'm talking about tonight is about shaping that narrative. little bits and pieces, plot lines. Not a full-scale deal. I'm not smart enough to do that in the 3 hours that we have together tonight. Actually, it'll just seem like 3 hours. How long do you think I've been talking so far? See, listening to me is like practice for eternity. You think it's been forever, and it's just been, 5-6 minutes. So all of this is introduction, just in case I got to a point. And that's why I don't use PowerPoint, because that assumes a point. So why give power to one? So I'm just going to put up little pieces of story, plot stuff, and you just pick and choose what you want to. You can quit listening anytime. Apparently they've quit listening in the back. Are y'all still here? I didn't. So here are a few. Here are a few. This presentation is going to get better. I'm almost sure of it now. Here are a few things for you to investigate in your journey towards self-awareness. And again, as soon as I remember some of them, I'm going to share them with you. But let's just start off with the most obvious. Your family of origin. I mean, everyone would expect me to start here, so I just will. I mean, in your family of origin, we all carry gifts. We all carry stuff less than gifts from our family of origin experience. Now, none of us chose our families of origin. And so I just wonder what God was up to, in case he wasn't caught by surprise. At when to insert you into human history, where and what family line, what experience. But there are two things that I've noticed in leaders, and if I'm just assuming you're leaders, I was told that in some email. When it comes to leaders in family of origin, there are two particularly critical pieces that I've noticed over the years. One is our families of origin are the first place we learned how to connect with other people. If there's any emotional Velcro on us, if anybody can stick or not. I mean, some of us grew up in families of origin that were cold. We weren't taught this. One of my very best friends never saw his mom and dad kiss. He never saw them much have a fight. There was no affection in his home. They were both missing their entire right sides of their brain. And this guy turns out to be an accountant. And I met him when his wife came to me and said, I don't think my husband knows how to love me. Now, they had several children, so I knew they'd been together some. But she was looking for more than that. And when I invited him into the discussion as a pastor, asking one of he was stunned. He said, "What do you mean?" I look after her, it's typical, said, yeah, but here's a clue though. If she doesn't feel loved, it doesn't matter what you feel at this point. If she doesn't feel loved, she doesn't feel loved. Now let's just go back, and this is when we uncover this. Now, by the way, if you grow up in a family that doesn't show affection, doesn't know how to do that, you think it's normal not to show affection and not to know how to do it. It's just, now, to this guy's credit, and he is a magnificent human being, one of my best friends to this day. He took out, this is the years before digital stuff, so people he took out his daytime or day planner and all that. Some of you can remember all the way back there. And he wrote down stuff, call home. Tell Susan I love her. Send a note. And he plans out a month of loving in advance, of loving stuff, and puts it on his calendar. Now, to her credit, she could have said, well, you just should know that. You don't even mean you have to write it down on your calendar to tell yourself to tell me that you love him. No, she saw him taking the same discipline the same enthusiasm, and intentionality that he was using to build 2 successful businesses, and take those same skills and apply to his marriage. They are fabulously happily married today, but he was completely unaware that he had grown up with a relational deficit. He simply didn't know how to communicate affection. Now, think back. There are some people I run into that have a long history of people disappointing them, a long history of people not measuring up, a long history of broken bodies behind them, and still thinking it's everybody else that's the problem here. Maybe there's some emotional velcro. Maybe people can't stick to you, and it's worth thinking about. And it's not too late. Now, by the way, we have some 20-somethings here. Where are the 20-somethings? I felt the room slighted in this direction. You see, this is the room where most of the bandwidth on the current Wi-Fi is being used up. I couldn't get on and obtain an IP address because they were busy with their video games and stuff like that. Now, you younglings in your 20s, I don't expect you to be as far along in self-awareness as I do somebody who's in their 50s and 60s, because quite honestly, you're still coming into experiences. You're still exploring. Now, some of you are far along for lots of reasons, some good, some bad. But honestly, in our culture today where we prolong entrance into young adulthood and all that, you're still feeling your way into this. What I find disturbing is to run into folks in their 50s and 60s who are still trying to decide what they're going to be when they grow up. And because they just have never seemed to get with us. Now, the other thing, and so for some of you, this will be brand new, this is stuff you'll need to investigate. Maybe for the first time. In my 20s, no one had talked to me about my capacity to relate to other people. I just assumed the way I related to people was just normal. And that people that didn't relate to me just that way, it was their issue. The second area that I find, so you got that relational intelligence. That's the first piece, and I could beat it to death, but you kind of have a sense for it. When it comes to families of origin, that's where we first learn that stuff. Now, we add to it in life, but that's the first. The second area that I mentioned that is important in leaders is also in our families of origin, is when we first learned how to fight. That's where we learned how to argue. That's where we were introduced to our conflicts. And that's probably where we picked up our early conflict management skills, or lack of them. Some of us grew up in families maybe that were hollerers and screamers, and we just get it on and we get it said and we get it out, and then we come to dinner. And the first time you tried that with your deacons or elders at your church, and wonder why they didn't want to come back to dinner. Maybe that was a shock to you. But this is how we deal with conflict. Maybe you ranted from the pulpit or something. I don't know. The other kinds of styles on the other far side of this is some of us grew up in homes not where we threw stuff around and holler and scream. No. We were very, let me just say it this way. You're dead to me. And you don't know when, you don't know how, but I will get you. Punitive, deadly, calculating. I'm around a lot of leaders like that. Cross them, you're out of here. It's almost like the old, Eastern despot. Only allow people smiling in my presence, telling me how wonderful I am. And if you're not, and most of us fall somewhere in between there. But I'm saying, how do you manage conflict? How do you respond to people in conflict situations? You probably picked up your first clues when you were growing up in your family of origin. I remember in our first year of marriage. Any of you, this is your first year of being married? Okay, it's all right. It's all right. Don't need to be all that embarrassed about it. So how long have y'all been married? 2 months. You looked at her. You don't know the answer to this? Let's have a chat. All right, so 2 months. That's good. I would say it was probably maybe 6 months in. We were having a very vibrant discussion, Kathy and I. We've been married 35 years come next July. But we were into it. Now, I grew up in one of those families where you got it out. You got it said. Very verbal. I know it's hard to imagine. Very verbal. And I mean, just to show you the sickness of my family. My father's a pastor. My 2 older brothers are pastors. My 2 sisters are married to pastors. My dad's older brother was a pastor. My dad's dad was a pastor, and his 7 brothers were pastors. We're like the Levites over in... It's like none of us knew how to get a job. We just kind of walked around waiting on the call to hit us. It did. It beat us up, actually. My family, there's been at least one clergy in my family in every generation, all the way back to a chaplain to the Continental Regulars. My family single-handedly has screwed up the North American church. Anything that's wrong with the church, we did it. I'm sorry, we didn't intend to. It's our fault. I'm just doing penance. I'm the last. I was trying hard to get a real job, go into politics or something honorable. So I don't talk about that anymore. All right. I forgot. Oh, Kathy and I were having a fight. That's where I left off. You see, it's such a painful memory. I'll just move away from it. And so we're in the middle of this, and Kathy stops me dead still. I mean, she still can. In fact, she told me earlier tonight she's praying for me, which means she's praying for you, because she knows me. So she says, Reggie, shh. This is not a debate. You win debates. And sure enough, I trained as a debater. And yeah, I knew how to take point and counterpoint, and I'd make the case. And if I could just outlast you, you'd have to come around, to my way of thinking, because my case was so logical, irrefutable and stuff. And she just reminded me, we are not in a debate. There's no judge out there deciding who wins this sucker. She says, we either both win this or we both lose this. She was a smart lady. But that was a shock to me, because my style, in fact, she would clam up, which I took as a sign of not caring. No, she just knew. She says, I need to think about stuff that I'm going to say for a while, because I want to have less stuff to retract than you do. Sure enough, I'd say we're on a 10-to-1, deal there. I've got way more stuff to retract. Get it up, and I still fight it, because that's just natural. It's the way I was, let's just get it on. So think back, and if you came to the retreat and you're on fairly good speaking terms with your spouse, maybe that's a point, while you're having fun together at a spiritual place, that you could, say, what about, how do I do that? What is it? See, because some of us are so defensive we can't even talk about stuff that we need to chat through. Others of us are so impervious we can't be, if people bring up stuff, we've already shielded ourselves again. Where are you in that? We first learned that from our family of origin. Now, if, by the way, you think that you might run into conflict as a minister, this becomes even more important. What amazes me is how many people in ministry are shocked to run into conflict situations. As if because Jesus said, look, they're going to leave you alone. I'm taking it all. They're not going to treat you like they treated me. Wasn't this what he said? He said, you guys are going to have it easy compared to what they're going to do. Are you kidding? the one thing we were promised in spiritual leadership is that we're going to have to deal with conflict. And nobody talked to me about that when I was in seminary. Nobody. It's as if we could just kind of go out there and figure out our way. Now, honestly, I'm thinking about a couple things. I don't know if it's the Spirit or not. I'll let you decide. Could just be scrumptions or whatever it was I had. What were those pork things that are designed to kill? What was that? Don't laugh at me. Tell me what it was. It was scrunchions. Scrunchion. There's nothing about it that's warm and fuzzy, actually. Although, I don't, later on they'll get, but they forced me to eat these things and then watch for a delayed reaction, which I'm just now having. Every head bow, every eye closed. I'll be right back. But since I'm talking about movements, there are some parts of conflict that no one ever talked to me about, and this has nothing to do maybe with your self-origin, but I feel compelled to share. It's what I'm saying from the heart of my bottom. And for instance, if you deal with conflict, some of you are dealing with some pretty sickos, pretty sick people out there. You can, and about all I was ever told, we read Matthew 18, and like you just throw scripture dust on people and they behave. Listen, there's some people in your congregations, you can throw the whole Bible at them and they're going to, in fact, you could hit them with the Bible. It might be the best use of it. And they're still not going to behave. They're terrorists. And there's a term for that. Now, I'm a little nervous about this, but since I haven't been paid, apparently this is free. So I'm a little, because I don't want you to think everybody who has a word with you or something fits this category, but there are two categories of people we deal with in congregational life that you need to be. One is the antagonist. The honest-to-goodness antagonist. Because some of you, congregations are famous for harboring antagonists. It's a kind of a safe haven for them. It's like mold growing under a rock. I mean, it's like we create an environment where, because some of them own the church. They've been there for 4 generations. They're the patriarch or the matriarch or whatever, and no one takes them on even though they're sick. Now, I'm talking about a very small percentage of people. Don't go everybody. Don't look at your spouse. I knew you were an antagonist. Don't go to the next person. But if you are dealing with one of these sickos, let me tell you, I want to try to warn you so you will not get your own sense of self warped. Because it'll warp you. Because you'll think you're sick. And there's something wrong. Here's an antagonist, for instance, is someone, you solve their issue, right? And they may be friendly and all that kind of stuff, but before long they're right back with another issue. They are serial issue people. And you keep solving and you keep moving, and they come on, but they just kind of keep you always alone. You just wonder, anytime you're with them, what's going to be the next thing? And let me tell you, some of us, not being acquainted with this, we think that they are having problems with us. Trust me, you're not the issue with the antagonist. In fact, don't take it personally. They were probably there before you got there. And they're going to deal with the person after you if you don't deal with them first. And they don't want you gone. Don't misunderstand. They don't want you to leave. That would take the game away. They love to hear you scream on the rack. That's what gives them pleasure, is to know that they keep you up nights worrying about stuff when they lob a grenade over the wall, and then they go on about their rat killing, and now you've got this stuff to deal with. And now, you probably will never run into one of these people, but I'm saying, if you do, I want you to know what you need to do. You got to cut their air supply off. Now, I mean, are we leaders? Can we talk? I mean, this is all, of course, in the Spirit. If you're going to lead a congregation, you better have a little political savvy, I'm telling you, or you're going to get killed. And Jesus already died for the church. You're not going to get killed for the church. You're dying for something else and it ain't worth it. I'm just saying that we sometimes over-spiritualize it. So you with a sudden. Now, by the way, there's a book that'll help you here. Although I've kind of condensed it, and I think I did a fabulous job. But if you bought one of my books, take it back, get the money back, and go get Ken Houck's book on antagonists in the church. Lutheran pastor, wonderful guy, mild-mannered. He's not a bohemian whatever, like I am. I've come across as freewheeling. I'm really not, but he's just a wonderful guy. But he's done a lot of work in this area. You cut their air supply off by saying to the antagonist, "The gig's up. I know the game now. You don't get my attention anymore." Now I'm assuming you tried. Matthew 18 was so long ago. You tried with them, you forgot it. I'm assuming you did all the biblical stuff and all that. All right. And you just say, "I'm not opening your emails. I'm not returning your calls because you're not interested. You're playing a game here that I'm just not playing anymore." You know, you can lob a ball over the net, but I'm not returning the ball. Now, you have to do this in concert with other leaders. And if you're thinking, "Oh, that just sounds too harsh," you probably haven't dealt with one of these animals. That's all. But for some of you, and maybe it's just two of you here, go free from them keeping you in the torture chamber. It's not your fault. You did not create them to be sick. They were sick before you met them, and they need help. But they're not willing to get it. And if your leaders won't back you up on this, then you might ask the Spirit for another assignment. Just a thought. Now the other, because by the way, there are some congregations that don't deserve pastors. Not yours. I'm just thinking about south, where I live. Have a lot of family chapels and hospice places that just want someone to come by and make them feel good about dying. Now, there's another category, and I don't know why y'all got me off into this. If you'd not asked that question, if I hadn't had to eat that stuff, no telling where we would have been by now. There's another category of conflict in your congregation that you need to be. And I'll tell you a story to introduce this. Because again, you may never deal with this. Some of you have. And you think you screwed up. And you've warped your sense of self and duty and calling and a whole bunch of stuff. So I go into this congregation to do a consult. And I interview the 8 members of the senior team. The senior pastor is a man I revere. I'm not overstating that. I revere him. He's older than me. He was a mentor 100 years ago in a previous life. It was so humbling just to be in his world and for him to, So I'll go and I do this interview to find out. So we come back together for my report. The consultants, and they're stuck. These are his words. We're stuck. It's like, and I gave him a metaphor. He says, like we're swimming through glue here. We just don't have any spiritual power. We're just what's wrong? So they come together, and my first, right out of the box, I give my report. And I say, the first thing we have to do is we have to take Frank out. And they look at me and they say, "What?" I said, "Well, we've got to take Frank out. He's the the hairball in the Spirit's ability to bring about renewal in this church. You've all said it, all 8 of you, in your individual deals. Now, I said, so we've got to take him out. And the pastor at the other end of the table, have I mentioned how much I like him and think of him? The pastor at the other end of the table says, well, I just believe love will win. And I said, well, get over it. Who makes up these little hallmark sayings? You know, leadership, love will win. Have you ever heard of hell? I asked him. And, you know, I mean, God loves everybody. Does everybody love him back? I don't think so. Love. I said, now listen, you've all named Frank. Now, by the way, just to set the record, because you would all make the same call. I'm not this swashbuckler. Frank, I'm using another name, of course. I think his name was Fred. Frank taught a Sunday school class of 350 people. And every Sunday, and he was a very wealthy person, and publicly had announced to his class, and everybody knew that he was withholding his money, you know, that spiritual discipline of bringing the church to its knees financially. He was withholding his money, wealthy guy in town, all this kind, and he used that every Sunday to rail against the pastor. He's not God, quote, not God's man for this church, all this kind of stuff. This had been going on for 9 years. Now, this pastor who believed love will win, sure enough, he loved on him. He'd done Matthew 18, probably 19 and 20. He had done all, so he said, when I said, well, just get over, we're past all that stuff. We're going to have to take him out. We've got to, you know. And he says, well, what do you mean by that? I said, we're going to relieve him of his duties as a Sunday school teacher because that's a cancer inside your system, and he's spewing toxicity into your world, and you're going to call him, well, I'll go to his office. And I said, no, you're not going to go to his. You've been to his office. You're going to wait, and you're going to ambush him on a Sunday morning with the other key leaders of the church, and you're going to tell him he is no longer teaching here. And then you're going to walk down to that Sunday school class of 350 people. You're going to tell them that Frank, is no longer going to be their teacher. I said, and then all hell's going to break loose. And it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. Cover up the ears of those children in here. Sure enough, it happened just exactly as, as we always expect. He threatened to sue the church. He came to every church service for over a year, all 3 on Sunday morning, sat on the front row, arms crossed, just the devil incarnate. And he was, and he actually, I'm just glad he didn't know my name. Sue me for bringing this kind of stuff up. Now, halfway into that year, I flew across the country. See, I'm coming. Flew across the country to meet this pastor in an airport lounge. I had continental thing. Because this guy is a lover. This was killing him. And he walked off that plane, and he looked like he'd just been beat up all kinds of ways. So we sat there. We had a couple hours together before he got back on the plane to go back, and I flew back home. And he said, I don't get it. He said, I've been there 9 years. I've given leadership. Why don't the leaders in our church take care of this guy? Why do I need to do this? I said, very tenderly, have I mentioned that I really like this guy? It's kind of hard to reverse mentor someone that you. I said, I'll tell you why. Because I said, this guy is a giant. He will crush any of your leaders. He's got political influence, financial influence, and they're scared if they take him on at the last minute, you're going to jerk the rug out from under him with something like, I just believe love will win. And they're going to be left against this guy, and he will crush them. I said, but if you'll take him on, I've talked to enough of them, I know they will support this. And then I reminded him of a story. About a guy I've already introduced into our conversation tonight. You remember when David, after anointed by Gandalf, and he's making pizza runs to his brothers. They're all off at war. He's doing groceries. And he comes into camp. And everybody is in their tent changing underwear. And he says to his brother, I thought there was a fight going on, a battle. And his brother says, older brother, you see that big ugly guy out there? Every day about this time he comes out and hollers at us and we decide to do laundry. Some of you will get that a little later on. But David then looks at him, sizes him up, says, I think I can take him. And his older brother goes, of course, why didn't we think of you sooner? I have 2 older brothers. That ain't how it goes down, I can tell you. And so, in fact, he says, who do you think you are? Kind of, you keep bringing the pizza. Don't forget the pepperoni next time. But so David says, well, what's in it for the guy that takes that big ugly guy out of the equation? Well, he gets a wife. King gives him a wife and gives some tax relief to the family and all that kind of stuff. Okay. David rehearses that all the way up, He goes over the conditions again. If you're going to take on a giant, you better figure out if it's worth it. I mean, you can wrestle a gnat, you're going to win. But you go up against a giant, you better count the cost of this sucker. And is the return worth the risk? Now, some of you are facing saboteurs. It ain't worth the risk. But some of you are facing saboteurs that, and by the way, don't misunderstand me or don't misunderstand them. With the saboteur, it is all about you. See, that's what Frank Fred was. He wanted the pastor gone, and the only way to deal with the saboteur is to take them out before they take you out. Now, I could talk nice, but we don't have enough time. And you don't have enough time to fritter away your life by being target practice for saboteurs. Get over it. When you're in those kinds of situations, you may have to be the one to face the giant. But you know what happened when David did? Before he finishes hacking Goliath's head off, which is a little more challenging leadership decision-making, than like a parliamentary decision or vote. I mean, leadership was tough in those days. So before he finishes working Goliath over, the same people that were in their tents are putting rout to the Philistines. Who are these people? Extras brought in for the movie? People need a champion sometimes. And sometimes it's your role. And I promise you this, the story you tell yourself about what role that is. Are you the Lord's anointed? Are you the one that has the responsibility of doing this? It will influence the way that you respond to those challenges. Now, that's kind of a long digression, but I'm using David as an example that your family of origin doesn't have to be the book on you either. It can inform you, but it doesn't have to be the book on you. David's family never got him. Never got him. Some of you, your families will never get you. Get over it. And by the way, that pastor that I shared that story with and reminded him and told him he had to be the champion, I said one more thing to him, have I mentioned I really like this guy? So this is I said, and Barry, or whatever, this is not about love anyway. Even though you say it is. He said, what do you mean? I said, this is about your need to win. You have it in your mind that Fred Frank is one day going to come to his senses, lay down his weapon, announced to the assembly, I was wrong. The pastor is right. I said, you've got to give up on that dream. You've got to give up on that victory. That's never going to happen with this guy. And he sat back and he looked, and this, by the way, great leaders do this. He thought through this and he looked at me and he came back down and he said, because great leaders can take cognitive dissonance and actually sift through their values, motives, and stuff. They can let the deck reshuffle. They don't have to play the same hand every time. They can learn and nimble. He sat there, I didn't say a thing. And he finally looked at me and says, you're right. I've been holding out to be the champion over this guy. I just need to deal with him. And he walked back on that plane, by the way, total different demeanor than when he came off. He went home to take care of business, and he did. He retired last year, this pastor that I love. Best chapter of his ministry been the last 10 years. Because he was willing to face the reality and not let a situation distort his own sense of, and he was willing to learn about his own self-motives in his mid to late 50s, that he was still willing to change and grow. That's growing self-awareness. That's growing beyond what we know about ourselves, and it frees us up to new avenues of being able to be used by God. Now there are some other, I don't want to, I cannot take any more questions. This is the lone point I've made tonight. And some of you have finished it for me. All right, so, by the way, there is another, and this looks even worse, I guess, because this looks like a British toilet, but phonetically, but your leadership of origin experience also is very important in many of the same ways as your family of origin experience is. Sometimes I ask people, and Coach, tell me the first time you realized you were a leader. And for some folks, it's, I was in the womb. I remember swimming around. And others, people had to tell them, you're a leader. And in all places in between. But when I find out, I said, go back and rehearse that. Because some of us, I have a friend. He's not finishing well. Because in his first leadership role, his leadership of origin, he had massive conflict. And you know what? He looks for that every single time he goes into a new assignment. He repeats that storyline that he's developed. He looks for it. If it's not there, he'll incite a riot so he feels more comfortable because he knows what role to play in that story. Others of us, have had fabulously, but go back and sift through. What did I take out of my first leadership experience? Am I expecting it to be just that way every time? What are the good things that I learned that I am looking to replicate? What are the things that I don't want to say? All right, I don't talk about that anymore. I've got 3 more things I want to say, and I will not be talked out of it. And I know that you're and I need 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes. 12. All right. But the band went on and on. And they always come up. We just have one more song that's going to take about 23 minutes. Let's sing that again. Where's that band leader? I'm just giving her a hard time. See there? She couldn't take it anymore. Oh, there she is. Good job. Have I mentioned that yet? All right, so there are hidden addictions and compulsions. Now, the reason... Compulsion. That would be to finish that. Don't worry about it. You can't read it from back there because you can't read it from up here. Now, the reason these are called hidden is because they're hidden. And they sneak up on you. I guess I grew up thinking, that everybody's maternal grandmother lived with them. Because that's the way I grew up. Mama Crane, Mama's mom, was just always there. She lived till she was 97. She and I never discussed how she got to be in my house. When I showed up, she was already there, had her room forever. She was just part of the deal. I mean, this is how slow to every party I am. She taught me how to play checkers. She played Monopoly with me in the summertime. She gave me special jewelry for my girl. We had a great relationship because never talked about her divorce from Charlie. Mom's dad, who was a great guy when he was sober, but he just wasn't sober enough. And it got to the point that before I showed up on the planet, in another era, when divorce had much more stigma and much more economic impact, she and Charlie, split, and my mom and dad took her in. And Mama Crane was just part of my life. Now, what I didn't realize is that made my mom, because I never talked about it, that because Mom's dad was an alcoholic, that made her an adult child of an alcoholic. Now, let me tell you why that's important. Because in my mid to late 30s, I had a significant burnout experience. Not from any great moral failure. I'm too afraid of Kathy for that. She's promised certain surgical procedures if I'm misbehave, and she always keeps her promises. So my burnout was pretty pedestrian. Just this long, slow slide into gray, from color to gray. Things were going great in the ministry. There were people who would love to be. Everybody else seemed to be enjoying the party. I wasn't enjoying the party. I was going from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, and that's just, the stuff's just, the scenery was whipping by so fast. I just felt more like an observer rather than a participant. And I just lost touch with emotions and a whole bunch of that. So I decided to do a little family of origin investigation. Because I'm the fourth out of 5 children. My oldest brother is 18 years older than me. And so I come way on down the food chain. And I needed to know some stuff about my family's early life before I showed up that impacted the world that I suddenly entered. So I talked to my brother. Anyway, so I'm on my way back to have some of those discussions. And I'm on American Airlines bulkhead row middle seat, which is the seat from hell. It's the seat where you can't stretch out on either side. You're pinned in this way. Your legs won't quite go this way. I mean, you're just stuck in the middle of this thing. Now, I'm reading a book called The Healing Journey. It's about adult children of alcoholics. To this day, and I've spoken with authors since, to this day, I don't know how I got this book. I don't know who gave it to me. I don't know if it came with an airline ticket. I have no idea how I got this book. But he's reading my mail. And I'm just crying on the plane. Now, I mention that because if you ever get stuck in the middle seat on the bulkhead, get you a book, start crying. People on both sides of you will give you all the room you want. You can stretch out. You can Unless one of them happens to be an evangelist, that needs a story, suddenly the crowd grows hostile. So I'm just, and he's talking, Daryl Quick. There again, take a book back if you got one of mine. Get the money. Or in this case, just steal this book if that's the only way you can get it. And God will forgive you. And he talks in there about the 3 lessons that adult children of alcoholics learn. Lesson 1 is don't feel. Now, my mom used a phrase with me all my life growing up, you shouldn't feel that way. It's one of the worst things you can say to a child or to anybody. For one, you just feel. Now, what you do with feelings, that matters. But to say you shouldn't have them, that big shouldn't feel that way. And particularly anger was not accepted in my house because that was an immediate emotional transfer to Papa. Because when he was drunk, he was mean, angry. So we had to get over being mad really quick, anytime we were. Tell your sister you're sorry. Hug, make up. And so, of course, since I was never allowed to be angry, I never was. You stuff those puppies down, and they come out to play in really unhealthy ways. Don't feel. Because, by the way, she couldn't afford to feel because she didn't know who was coming through the door. She couldn't get her hopes up because the person in her life that so defined her world was so mercurial that she wouldn't let herself risk like that. She just wanted to be invisible when bad Charlie came. Don't feel. Secondly, very close to it, don't trust. You don't trust. You learn not, well, of course not. I can't trust because I don't know who's coming through. So here I am. I'm dealing with feelings now. And see, by the way, these things get passed down the generational food chain. So I grew up in a home where I would learn, you don't tell other folks your stuff. And that's the 3rd lesson, by the way, just to hurry through this. Don't tell. Don't feel, don't trust, don't tell. Shame. All the shame. I grew up in that. No wonder I was struggling. I was having feelings that I didn't know how to articulate, feeling like I shouldn't be having them, first of all, but then they're there, and I sure couldn't bring anybody in to my life because I couldn't trust them. I thought if I told them that stuff, they would know then I wasn't perfect then, and they would beat up on me, and the party would be over, and all these scenarios that the enemy of our soul whispers to us and then don't tell. I was a perfect disaster, perfect recipe for burnout. Now, I mention this to you because probably some of you, in fact, I never tell this without somebody in the crowd, like in Boston, CNMA group, 375 pastors. And I told the story right before the break, and then I'm going up to the room for a minute between sessions. And just as the door about to close, a hand comes in, the door opens, he steps in, and I hear his story for 9 floors. And he says, it never dawned on me till you talked about it. My dad was an adult child of an alcoholic. I think I can forgive him now. And the guy in the elevator with me is 74 years old. He said, he's crying. He said, I wish somebody had told me sooner. Because his dad is long gone. I said, well, I wish someone had told you sooner too. But you've got today, and you can deal with this. And I'm on a break, and I'm tired of this. I'm getting off of this next floor. Deal with it. No. I just thought I'd throw that in just to bring you back. You were getting a little mushy on me. Some of you may have, I don't know. Because of what, I promise you there was no alcohol in my house. See, when I was growing up, I mean, the addictions morph as they move down the food chain. We didn't even have cough syrup. My mom would rather me die from whoop and cough than get a swig of Vicks 44 or whatever. And so, I've been trying to make up for it ever since. With that WWJD bracelet, have y'all seen those that I've got going? What would Jesus drink? I mean, we all know. I mean, be wine. I mean, all right. So I had a Baptist pastor tell me, he said one of his members saw him having a glass and out in a restaurant. Pastor, I'm just I don't believe in that. And he said, well, Jesus had wine. And she said, yeah, and I think less of him for it too. All right, so that's what religion will do for you. So tonight, I'm here to announce we have a wine bar opening as soon as this session is over. Maybe not. All right, so just to mess with you. I mean, this is Canada, right? And the liberals, have I missed where I am? If you're going to legalize marijuana, don't stop there. I mean, go nuts here. I mean, just enjoy it on your way. All right. Have I got you back now? All right. I probably ought to be more careful since I haven't been paid. Come to think of it. All right. For my family, it was food and work. Those became our drugs of choice. That's how we anesthetize ourselves. So the burnout all comes out of that. And food, I still have a relationship every time I have a meal. And, and so it's those are the things that you have to figure out. Now, they're hidden. They may just be annoying. But they could be crippling. I don't know. I promise you this, though, as long as they stay hidden, if they're not teased out, then you don't know what damage they're doing. I have all of my doctoral students read a book, and I'm going to end with this, so we're getting close to having release. I have all my doctoral students read another book that you should exchange. Why CEOs Fail. It's a longitudinal study done at the Center for Creative Leadership, Greensboro in North Carolina, on mid-level managers who self-sabotage their own careers. And it's been lifted to the CEO level, and Dotlick and Cairo, two Harvard professors, have done the analysis on it, and they've developed a taxonomy of 11 pathologies that executive leaders use to take ourselves out, whether we know it or not. See, that's the key. Like arrogance, number one, arrogance. In the book, they propose several ways of dealing with these. Arrogance, I will tell you, is the most difficult one because the arrogant leader doesn't think they're arrogant. They're just smarter than everybody else. They just, they have endless capacity to rewrite the scenario so it's your deal. About the only thing that works with an arrogant leader is failure. And it rarely works because of that capacity of the arrogant leader to say, I knew that wouldn't work to begin with. I was just letting y'all do it, or assign blame to somebody else. But things like overcautiousness, need for approval, these are these dark sides grow out of these hidden addictions and compulsions. I kind of hate to send you off into the night on that dark note, but I am going to because I'm tired. And I don't want to talk about this anymore. And y'all look like you're in agreement. Some of you are on the floor already. It's been an attitude of prayer. But the truth is, you just need to know where some of this stuff comes from. You are in a tribe that values spiritual realities in different ways than some tribes can. You are well aware, because of your tribe, that there is an enemy whose kingdom we are invading, who is terrified by one thing over all. Now, by the way, he knows the end game, all that stuff. It's just to show you how arrogance still works, even when you know the end game. But he's so arrogant. But the thing that terrifies him the most is that you would become you. Because if you become you, you see, you're making a case for God. You're making a case for the intentionality of life. You're making a case, just like Jesus did, who, by the way, lived perfectly, not just in the ways that we think about. He didn't cuss or drink or go with girls doing all that kind of stuff. But he lived a perfect life, meaning he lived the only fully complete life that's ever been lived. Not just what he didn't, but what he did. To show us what life is supposed to be like. So the enemy of your soul is terrified that you would become more you. Just don't let him win. Because if you don't become you, we're going to miss you. Because you're the only you we got. And we're counting on you. And so is God, who made you after all.